My favorite time of the week, rank punditry here on the New Hampshire Journal podcast. And we go for the rankest of the rank this week. We've got Rick Wiley, notorious GOP strategist. Rick, welcome.
It's great to have you, or it's great to be here, Michael.
And of course, someone to leaven the loaf by bringing some common sense and sanity, but not too much, please. Alicia Preston Xanthopoulos, APX. How you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
We are great. So first things first, a lot of polling out this week about the shape of the two parties. Rick Wiley, you've worked on national campaigns, presidential campaigns, obviously worked a lot here in New Hampshire. How would you describe the current, if you were a doctor looking at the two patients, Republican and Democrat, how would you describe them?
I would say the best thing Republicans have going for them right now is the Democrats. I mean, they have been wandering in the wilderness for quite a while. And, Republicans might not be doing things that Republicans like in certain instances. But again, I mean, the opposition out there, the Democrats are just in disarray and have been for quite some time. So, the edge goes to the GOP right now, for sure.
Do you think so, APX? Do you think the Democrats are in such bad shape that they're lifting the Republicans by reverse gravity?
No, I think they all suck. And when they all suck, what happens and what will happen in November is that the sitting party will get predominantly ousted. Yeah. None of them are doing their jobs.
So Rahm Emanuel is at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, a place you know very well, Mr. Wiley, and he was asked about 2026. He said, look at all the wins for Democrats around the country in the special elections, local elections. He says, here's what happens. The party out of power, their turnout goes up. They get super jazzed. The party out of power, they get complacent, and then independents tend to break. I think he said 2-1 towards the party out of power. That seems like pretty straightforward math to me, and it would seem to be pretty determinative.
I think the polling shows that, there's no doubt about it. And the group, the independents are in New Hampshire, there are a lot of independents up there, and they're the ones that control each election, and they're unhappy, right? I mean, and one of the things, the biggest driver of this is affordability. And, from my perch, Republicans just do not talk about it. And it baffles me. But I think they have a hard time talking about it because some of the things that are happening, they're all happening on their watch. And so it's hard to make the case, especially if you're someone like running for a statewide office coming from Congress, for instance. There are a few people out there doing that. It's tough to make that. It's tough to make that case. So the independents, you're right, they're not happy right now, and ultimately, I'm not sure what brings them back. And I agree with you, Alicia. I mean, the Democrats are in disarray. I'm thinking more of 2028 before, but there's a step before that in 2026, and yeah, right now it's not looking very good. Now, the other thing I would say though is, you throw them out, and who do you replace them with? And that's where the Democrats sometimes, will put up some strange candidates out there. So we'll see what it shakes out once primary season.
Hey, don't you be dissing my man and namesake Graham Plattner. We Graham's got to stick
together. He's going to win anyway. What are you talking about?
Exactly. I want to ask about that second, but first because APX is the comms expert. Here's my theory. If Trump had the ability to say things aren't great right now, he could have been in much better shape, because he could have gotten in office and said, look, we just had 4 years of Biden. He undid all my stuff. Things right now are bad. They are bad, but they're going to get better. And then he could have spent this last year saying better, better, better. But instead, APX, I'm here. Everything's the best. It used to be the worst. Blah, blah, blah. Do you agree with my calm strategy?
You're 100% correct. I mean, the Republicans, starting at the top, are making the exact same mistake that the Democrats made for 2024. And that is, tell me not to believe my lying eyes. They're telling me everything's fantastic. The Democrats did the exact same thing in the lead up to the 24 election, and we saw the results. And now the Republicans are doing it. We go to the grocery store. We go to the gas pumps. Things are too expensive. Livability is difficult right now. Empathize with us. Stop telling us it's not true. That's when we're going to vote you out.
So I want to try to explain to Rick Wiley how unpopular Donald Trump is in New Hampshire. Can you help me, APX? I mean, I'll put it this way. We just had an incident where a car caught on fire at a toll booth, and Governor Ayotte happened to be by, and her trooper who accompanies her rushed out and pulled it. 60% of Americans, if they'd seen Donald Trump in that car, would have kept driving. I mean, excuse me, 6% of Granite Staters. That's how bad it is. I mean, they really don't like him. Would you say that's a fair description, APX?
Look, he's never won a general election in New Hampshire, and
But beyond that, they
none of the
don't
people
like
he
him.
supported have won a general election in New
But
Hampshire.
Mitt Romney's never won here either. John McCain's never won here either. They don't hate him the way they hate Donald Trump.
Oh, well, I don't think they had the same reason to hate them. And Mitt and McCain were not on the ballot along with their supported candidates as many times as Trump. He's never won here. It is the independents. I mean, Rick is right. It's the independents. The biggest quote unquote party in the state of New Hampshire are independents. And they will make the decision as they always do. They're not likable to him. He doesn't empathize with what we're going through right now. And Kelly Ayotte, I hope they've got video somewhere. Let's not forget, it wasn't just her troopers. She got out of that vehicle and tried to use a fire extinguisher. Like that. That's when you get to try to save someone's life and you're the sitting governor, that's a pretty good campaign message.
Absolutely. No, I want to get to that second because I think Ayotte's in a really good spot. But the thing I want to ask Rick Wiley, because once again, you've worked at the national level, you've gone state by state with your candidates for president, like my former governor, Nikki Haley. Yep. You know what atmospherics mean. In other words, if the atmosphere is, I just don't want to vote for your party, it's just tough no matter what you do at the ground level. So how would you describe the atmospherics in general? And if you were, you have some New Hampshire Republicans called you and said, hey, I'm running for state senate, I'm running for whatever, what can I do? What would your advice be?
It's interesting because you have a huge Senate race up there, and that primary is very interesting to me. I feel like it's General Bolduc versus the field, and General Bolduc is Scott Brown this time, which is very interesting to me because it wasn't like that, 8 months ago. And
right.
That Senate race will be very interesting because you're swimming against the tide if you're the Republican in that race, the Republican nominee, and you've got a situation where you do. I mean, in New Hampshire and across the country with polling, at least, you've got the president underwater, and he's underwater on the issues that Republicans are normally not underwater on, and that's the big tell out there. Somehow. Remarkably, and I blame Kristi Noem for this, she turned immigration against Donald Trump. It was his number one issue, and now it's not. And it was the tactics or whatever it was. And so somehow you have to find a lane where, again, empathy. You have to be able to sit down with the voters. I like what Scott Brown's doing. I like the town hall prospect here. That's where you have to go in New Hampshire. Just go town hall to town hall and tell them what's going on out there and be honest with them. I mean, Scott Brown doesn't have anything to lose. He doesn't have Trump's endorsement, so you can talk a little bit about some of the things that might have landed with a thud with polling and things like that. And so I think, to your point, you have to be willing to say, yeah, we have some problems here. And here's my solution to fixing them. But the first part of anything like that is identifying and saying you have a problem. And we have too many Republicans out there right now who are just like, oh yeah, everything's fine. I mean, everyone knows everything's not fine right now. And the first person to admit that might be the one who comes out on top.
Well, we know a bunch of people have admitted it. It's all the members of Congress who are not running again.
Yeah.
Who are Republicans, a record number. Before I get back to APX, let's ask you the Senate race. The surprise here is that Johnny Sununu is in a tied race with Chris Pappas. New Hampshire just doesn't vote Republican for federal races. How do people outside New Hampshire view this race? And I'm going to throw Mark Helprin's theory is this is the sleeper race. It's the one that's going to surprise people. And if Republicans hold control of the Senate, he predicts it's very likely it'll be because they had a pickup in New Hampshire that made the math for Democrats impossible around the rest of the country.
I mean, having been involved in, 3 or 4 of these Senate races over the course of the last 12 years, I mean, it's tough up there. And, I mean, we thought Don Bolduc was going to win on election night. And, Neil Levesque told me, St. A's was in the field after the only televised debate with Maggie Hassan, which Don Bolduc cleaned the stage with her, and he had us tied going into election day, and we lost by 10 points. So it's just tough sledding, and I don't understand. And the governor, it's a great example. She's got high watermarks up there. She's doing a great job, and so they really do differentiate between state and federal politics in New Hampshire, unlike any other place I've seen. And so it's tough out there. Could Sununu, if he wins the primary? I mean, this primary is. I don't think this primary is over yet. I mean, if you believe the polls and Scott Brown's down 20, maybe.
Right.
But you're out there. It's April the 2nd, and this is about the time in 2020 when Don Bolduc, we had $0 in the bank, and the general, I just said, look, let's go do some town halls, and we ended up doing, I think, 55 before the primary, and the guy came out of nowhere, but he was everywhere before that, and that's what Scott Brown's doing out there. So who knows who wins that primary? The Sununu name carries a lot of weight in New Hampshire, though, and whether they believe it's John E. or they think it's Chris, I don't know, but the Sununu name. I mean, if you're going to run as a Republican in New Hampshire, that's a pretty good name to run on.
APX, how's the Senate race looking to you?
The poll did say that John Sununu's within the margin of error. I think that's very tight. I agree with most of what Rick said. It's hard for Republicans in federal seats in the last several years, but anything's possible. It's an uphill battle. I was surprised by the split between Sununu and Brown in the primary. I figured Sununu would be ahead for name ID only, but I was a little surprised. I think it was 23%. That being said, it is early. I mean, I got a call this morning from an elected Democrat who said Scott was just up in her area and she loved what he was doing and the people loved it. He's everywhere. And I've got no horse in this race. I think both of them would make a great senator. But Scott's working a completely different campaign than Johnny Sununu, and it's early. And if Democrats are calling people being like, wow, that guy's working his butt off, should we be nervous? That says something, even if it's anecdotal.
No, I agree. And Scott Brown is out working. And if there is a way to have, I thought it was interesting at his kind of his relaunch event the other day in Bedford, he had about 200 people show up and he called them the Brown Brigades. I don't know that he's going to be able to recreate the Buchanan Brigades, but if you start getting people thinking that way, that this is the insurgent, I think that's the path.
You can feel it on the ground. When you're out there, you can feel it on the ground. You really can. And I agree. I saw that Bedford event. And I was like, that's a great venue, but it was a good crowd. That's a big room
200
to
people,
fill.
and they were enthusiastic. They weren't there for the wings. They were there to support him. I want to ask you a broad national question, Rick Wiley. Which party is going? The House is done. Democrats going to take the House of Representatives in D.C. Which party will control the U.S. Senate in 2027?
I was having this conversation a couple of weeks ago where someone was like, "Oh, the Democrats are going to control the Senate." And I was just like, "Okay, I may concede North Carolina is an uphill battle, right? So that gets you down to 52." Then they're like, "Well, Susan Collins." I'm like, "I don't know, man. She survives." And I was at the Senatorial Committee in 2020. Right. When everyone left her for dead, and it was ranked choice voting, and the first time ever, and all these things. Sarah Gideon, I think, raised, I don't know, $500 million, it seemed, and Susan Collins skated through that race, and so I don't see where you can lose 4 seats on the Republican side. I mean, you're talking places like Ohio or Alaska.
Right.
But
I remember Sherrod Brown, former U.S. Senator, running again. Ohio's definitely. I'm just gonna say this: there are states that are losable. North Carolina's done; it's already lost. Sign it up. Michael Watley's one of the worst candidates ever. Maine, you just don't know. Like you said, does Susan Collins have her magic? Whatever she does, I don't understand. But Ohio, a former U.S. Senator coming back in, that could definitely happen. And where's the other likely?
Everyone thinks Texas if Kim Paxton wins. I don't know
Texas,
if I buy that.
No, it's pretty Republican.
Yeah,
So it's tough.
Yeah.
Alicia Preston Xanthopoulos. I'm going to get it right eventually. Which party is going to control the New Hampshire State House? Not the governor's office, but the State House and Senate in 2027.
I think the House is probably going to go to the Democrats. I think it's going to look very similar to what we see in the federal level. I think the state Senate will hold Republican with much tighter margins. Right now, we've got 16 Republicans.
Supermajority.
Yeah, and 8 Democrats. I think that number is going to absolutely tighten if you look district by district, but I think Republicans will hold the Senate.
Let me ask you a broader question. But everyone note that Wiley has got his New Hampshire sign above him for the podcast. Well, you don't know, he has 50 of those all different states, and he just puts them up. It's a total suck up. He's trying to get more local clients. It's brilliant marketing, by the way. Got it. Yeah. Brilliant marketing. But what people keep asking me, how can New Hampshire be New Hampshire? You look around the region, and it's not just, New Hampshire's a little less purple or whatever. No, Vermont is crazy. Mm-hmm. Massachusetts is crazy. Maine is Graham Plattner crazy. The Nazi tattoo commie is going to win his primary 3-1. Yeah. While New Hampshire Democrats are fleeing from the idea of even using an income tax just for a shift, move it from property tax to income tax, no net gain. In Massachusetts and Maine and Vermont, they are voting to raise taxes. Either they just raise them or they're trying to raise them. APX, what is the deal? How does New Hampshire stay so different from its neighbors?
Well, we always have been, right? It's, we used to be more red. Now we are a little purple, but we're certainly not blue. And I think there is a changing tide, though. And it started during COVID with mass influx of people from states like New York and Massachusetts. That's why you're actually starting to see at the local level, municipalities, a lot of more liberal policies going into those municipalities. And as that expands, we may see some of that statewide and in congressional districts. But New Hampshire inherently has an independent streak. And I mean that with a little I. We don't want to be told too much what to do. And we don't want to see what we're seeing over the border in Maine and Vermont and Massachusetts with the increase in taxes. Even, Andrew Volinsky comes out with this little income tax plan, whatever he called it. And even Democrats push back. They're like, that's just not what we do. There's a lot of that's just not what we do in New Hampshire type mentality on a lot of issues. And that's what we're seeing.
So, Rick Wiley, you've seen the polls as you're taking a national candidate around. What jumps out at you when you were in Iowa, you're headed to South Carolina, and then you look at these numbers from New Hampshire and you go, what jumps out to the national people when they look at us?
I think it's the way you got to campaign in New Hampshire. Iowa's wildly different. Iowa, they'll sit there and you hold a town hall and they just sit there and stare at you. You have no idea what it's just blank looks. And I'm from the neighboring state of Illinois. Go Illinois Fighting Illini, by the way. Final Four, huge.
That is huge.
Huge. But in New Hampshire, as soon as you set foot in the state and you hold that first town hall and you get this wild question out of left field about something you weren't prepared for, and then you're like, wow, I gotta be a little more on my game here. And it makes you a better candidate, honestly. It just does. And so I think I love New Hampshire. I love campaigning in New Hampshire. I love taking candidates to New Hampshire. I love the history and everything you do in New Hampshire. And so again, I just think it's a place where if you're on the presidential circuit, you spend a little more time here. You never spend any time in South Carolina, right? Like South Carolina is the forgotten one. You gotta go to the first two and make your way around. And it just makes you a better candidate being in New Hampshire. And the voters care. They really do. They'll show up, and as we all know, I mean, they'll show up to 15 different town halls in 10 days for 15 different candidates because they just want to hear them and try them all out. So it's a fabulous place, and just everything about it is what campaigns should be made for.
Well, as a guy from South Carolina who used to run campaigns in South Carolina, I should step up and defend South Carolina, and I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Which tells you everything you need to know about South Carolina. So the new Harry Enton CNN poll shows, as you were talking about, Rick Wiley, Republicans are unpopular. Democrats are really unpopular. In fact, ask them, how is the Democratic Party doing in Congress? Are they leading on the right issues? 55% of Democratic voters say they're wrong, that they're getting it wrong. And in part, that's because of issue extremism. It's hard because everyone's grumpy, whatever. But this is what I'm trying to figure out. How have the Democrats done so well at the federal level in New Hampshire? And I have a theory, APX, I want to run by you, which is they have embraced the boring. If you can be a boring federal Democrat who doesn't seem to actually be involved in any issues and have any dog in any fight, you're just kind of there. You're the lump in the back of the room because there's a natural aversion to the National Republican Party that makes people, my Republican governor fine, but I don't like those weirdos down there in DC, particularly Trump. You can kind of ride the wave, and it doesn't matter that you cast, as Johnny Sununu keeps saying over and over again, 222 out of 223 votes with Nancy Pelosi. No one ever holds Senator Shaheen or Representative Pappas responsible for their actual voting record. They just go, he's not one of those Democrats. I don't. He's Democrat enough. That's my theory. The power of boring. What do you think?
I think that could be part of it. None of them are bombastic. None of them get into the mud. Jeanne Shaheen and Maggie Hassan were very popular governors, and so there's a familiarity with them, and I think that helps. And neither were super controversial. And if you look at Chris Pappas, look, the guy's a likable guy. And to your point,
absolutely.
He doesn't get into the mud. He doesn't get dirty. And he talks about issues, and people may even disagree with him on issues, but they don't dislike him. And so I think that's a big difference.
So I want to push back on it a little bit, Rick Wiley. I don't think that doesn't get in the mud. He doesn't get in anything. Like there's no issue that you associate with him. He never gives a speech. He doesn't go, I'm there to cut taxes. Or I'm there to, it's just, I'm there to be there. It's kind of like, well, somebody's got to be the congressman.
It's very interesting because, when I was running General Bolduc's race, we tried to pull Maggie Hassan out, like get her to do something, go somewhere. We ended up having a cardboard cutout of her, and we would take it to town halls and put it off to the side, and their ability to keep their head down, like you said, Alicia, they're not on cable news, they're not, bombastic. I couldn't tell you if Chris Pappas is. I assume he's part of the woke brigade, but I don't know that for sure, and because again, they don't say anything. And so it's hard for a voter then to put them in that crazy Dem camp when you've not heard them say it. And they're, there's a lot to be said for a federal office that does constituent services well, because that's really what voters see them. That's their job, right? And so if you've had, and a lot of people do that, and New Hampshire is a small state. They've had some kind of conversation, some kind of touch point with their members of Congress and the senators, and it's been a good one. Then they don't believe anything that someone like me is trying to tell you about them. And so I think there's they just do a good job of keeping their head down and just kind of like plodding along, and they get rewarded every 2 years.
So this is the last thing. I think that if 2022 had been a normal midterm, Hassan could have lost because just like she doesn't exist to cause problems, she also doesn't exist for your support. You said APX that she was popular. Go back and look at her poll numbers. She was not popular in her second term. In fact, if you look at the polls for all of New Hampshire is a state full of people in the 40s. All the federal members are in the 40s, except governor. And then that's where you get some real heat numbers. APX, why do you think it is that Governor Ayotte's poll numbers consistently are fine, but not great? You know what I mean? Compared to Sununu, they're nowhere close. I don't think she's over 50% approval in any poll I've seen in the last 3 months. And yet everyone looks at her and goes, man, she's going to be tough to beat. She's in great shape. How do those two go together? I know that Steve Marchand, the former mayor of Portsmouth, who's a political activist, he puts on his podcast all the time, she's so vulnerable. Look at her. She's under 50. And everyone goes, yeah, she's under 50. No, she's not vulnerable.
I think she's vulnerable depending on who her opponent is. Right now, it looks like it's Cindy Warmington. I don't think Cindy has a great chance of beating Kelly Ayotte. Look, Kelly Ayotte's below 50% because of Donald Trump. It's just that simple. It has nothing to do with her. It has when people are polled, she's a Republican, I say boo. And that's it. You're not going to hear a lot of specific complaints of Kelly Ayotte in her job itself. It's just the R next to her name.
Yeah, again, someone who you don't see Kelly Ayotte out there throwing bombs on cable news. She just puts her head down and gets the job done. And there's something to be said. Like you said, boring politicians, man, boring isn't a bad thing, like it became a bad thing. And I'll take boring again, I mean, just like this performative politics is getting kind of old right now.
I will say that Donald Trump and Graham Plattner and AOC and Ken Paxton are all making me long for boring. Boring looks good. I've always said that my ultimate presidential candidate is Scott Walker. That was the guy. Scott Walker, he was going to show up at the White House at 9 a.m., take out his lunchbox, put it on the table. He'd sign his papers. He'd give his speeches. Around noon, he'd open it up, get out the bologna sandwich. There's a little affirmation note from his wife. Do good, Mr. President. He'd finish up, go to an official dinner, and be home watching cable by 8. That's what I want. I want a person for whom the presidency is just a job. For Reagan, it was just a job. I'm like, hey, someone's going to be president. I'm going to do my job. And that was it. It wasn't his ego wrapped up into it. Now we've got these people who are so desperate to prove something about themselves. Ugh. So that's who's your ideal presidential candidate, Rick Wiley?
Boy, I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to watch. But I used to say governors make great presidents, and senators don't, and every senator sees himself as a president. But I don't know. I honestly don't. I don't know what the field's going to look like. I think JD Vance has a big lead right now, and all of a sudden you throw Marco in there now because of the Iran war, and all of a sudden Marco's gone from nothing to 25% and things like that. So I think it's wildly unsettled at this point.
Who is a great presidential candidate, APX?
Nikki Haley. I'm not letting that
Great
go.
candidate.
I'm Team Nikki Haley.
I love Governor Haley. She's
a great candidate, there's no doubt.
Well, if she, the problem is that she's a Clemson person. And so once you go Clemson, you can never go back. If she would join us over at USC, the Fighting Gamecocks of South Carolina, then we'd be doing much better. We are doing great because we were lucky to have Rick Wiley and APX with us. Thank you so much for being part of the ranked punditry here on New Hampshire Journal.
Good to be with you, man. Take care.
Thanks, Michael.